So we've been discussing this final or ultimate view, and that's taught to be the view that is free of views. And specifically, when we say the view that is free of views, then we mean that it is free of these 5 mistaken views. And you might be wondering where this teaching comes from. Well, this teaching comes from the Abhidharma. And as I've said before, then there are 3 categories or baskets of the Buddha's teachings. There's the Abhidharma, the Sutra, and the Vinaya. And it comes from this basket called the Abhidharma. And what is the Abhidharma, you might ask? This is the collection of teachings that explains psychology and phenomenology. Now it sounds very complicated, but basically it explains the universe and everything in it. And that is divided into form and into consciousness. And so that represents this classical division between mind and body. Now the teachings on the Abhidharma are extensive, and there are many different categories. But the first chapter is the chapter on the aggregates. So if you'll remember, then there's forms, feelings, discriminations, formations, and consciousness. These 5 aggregates make up the mind-body continuum. And where this teaching on the 5 mistaken views comes from is the teachings on mind and what are called mental factors. So this falls into the category of name. There's name and form. Form is material substance, and name refers to these aspects of mind or consciousness. And in all levels of the Buddha Dharma, then form is said to be made out of quantum particles. They're like atoms, but they are quantum particles because they're indivisible. And consciousness is said to be made up of these quantum time moments. So they are discrete moments of consciousness that are indivisible. And when it comes to the description of mind and mental factors, then there are said to be, in the Mahayana tradition, 51 mental factors. There's sometimes taught to be 42 mental factors or 52 mental factors, depending on the tradition. But in the Mahayana Dharma, at least, then it's taught to be 51. And within those 51 mental factors, there are various different categories. And one of these categories is called the 6 root afflictions: attachment, anger, ignorance, pride, doubt, and view. And it's this final one, view, that represents these 5 mistaken views. So all mistaken views fall into this category of the 5 mistaken views. And this is why ultimately it is taught that the final view is this view that is free of view. And today we've arrived at the 5th and final of these views, and that is the view that takes discipline and ascetic conduct to be supreme. And when I say discipline, that refers to the vows. So primarily it refers to the monastic vows, but really one could say that this refers to our conduct. And it refers to taking conduct to be supreme, or to be the final goal of our practice. Someone could have very good conduct and keep all of their vows, but still have a very negative way of thinking. For example, look down on those who are not monastics. And it's not only that we shouldn't cling to the vows themselves as being supreme, and think that if we keep our vows then we're better than others, but moreover, the goal of the Buddha Dharma itself is not just about these vows. And we can see this because if we look at the yogis of the past, then sometimes they seem to engage in very strange conduct. If we look at the story of Saraha, who was initially a fully ordained Gelong, that is a mendicant with a full set of vows, and famously, as Saraha himself said, it is only once he relied upon a consort that he became an authentic mendicant. Now this was quite shocking to his community, because up until then Saraha had kept his vows very pure, and so he lived a chaste life. So this final point isn't merely about clinging to monastic vows as being supreme. It is, in fact, clinging to monastic vows as supreme, but also clinging to this yogic conduct or ascetic conduct as being supreme. This can be interpreted in 2 different ways, because there is this ascetic practice that denies the body the simple necessities like food and shelter and clothing. For example, Milarepa went off into the mountains and meditated in the snow caves, This is an extreme form of yogic practice. Now likewise, clinging to this as being the true Dharma is taught to be a mistaken view, merely seeing this extreme renunciation as being the actual end goal of our practice. What we need to do is to realize the view, and not only that, we need to be able to rest in that view, or the recognition of the true nature of phenomena. And again, this final or ultimate view is what we call the Mahamudra, Dzogchen. It is a mental placement that does not abide in the extremes of existence nor non-existence. It is what we call non-referential compassion that is free of all elaboration. So it's somebody, basically, who has gone beyond conceptual thinking, who abides in what is called non-dual wisdom. So we could be mistaken in taking these practices of self-mortification to actually be the end goal of our practice. For example, not eating food, not sleeping, not wearing clothing. But likewise, we could take yogic conduct, for example, relying on a consort, as being the ultimate goal in our practice. Now on a low level, then this is something that happens a lot in the West. People hear about these Vajrayana practices of deity union and they get the wrong idea. They think that they don't need to abandon their desire and their anger and their negative emotions, and that they can just carry on as they wish and engage in whatever conduct they wish, and mistake this as being the actual purpose or end goal of their spiritual path. But as I've said many times before, then these are all merely methods. Keeping monastic vows, a life of chastity and simplicity, is merely a method for coming to realize the truth of no self. By habituating ourselves to virtue and avoiding negativity, then the mind is able to rest in samadhi. And likewise, undergoing extreme hardship in order to practice the Dharma is also merely a method for coming to realize the truth. In Milarepa's case, then he had a lot of negative karma that he needed to undo and eradicate. And so, in order to purify his negativities, he had to undergo extreme hardship on the spiritual path. Whereas it is true that you can use your desire as a method for coming to realize the true nature. This doesn't mean by merely falling sway to your negative emotions that you will make any significant spiritual progress on the path. To give you a simple example, then when Gampopa met Milarepa, Milarepa offered Gampopa a glass of beer. And because Gampopa was a monk, then he hesitated. He thought, if I drink this alcohol, then I'm going to lose my vows. Milarepa said to Gampopa, "You think too much, just drink." He wanted him to drink of the nectar of the Dharmakaya, to come to realize the true nature of phenomena. And in order to do that, then Gampopa had to let go of his clinging to the monastic vows as being supreme. So now we've come to the end of this discussion on the final or ultimate view, that is the view free of all views, or the view free of the 5 mistaken views. Now that I've covered all the topics, I would suggest, if you have time, to go back over the videos and to remind yourself of these various different stages. We have the view of the perishing collection, and that is clinging to the mind and body aggregates as being a self. Although we realize that the self does not exist in the hand, or in the arm, or in the leg, we cling to this notion that this body is me, but also sometimes we cling to the notion that the body is mine. And likewise it's the same with our mental events, our emotions, our feelings, our discriminations, etc. We see these to be personal, but also to be part of what makes up this identity of a self. And then secondly, there are these perverse views, the views that take natural negativity to be something positive, and likewise to take virtue to be negative. And so in order to make progress on our spiritual path, we have to abandon these perverse, mistaken, or backwards views. Third, there is the view of the 2 extremes, and that is any view that holds to existence or non-existence, what we call permanence or nihilism. And I've covered this topic in several other videos, including my short explanation of the middle way. Fourth is the view that holds view or ideology to be supreme. And this is this view that takes the actual philosophy or the theories of the Dharma to themselves be the ultimate goal. Primarily, this is a difficulty for those who are overly intellectual. and those who see philosophical tenets to themselves be the realization that needs to be developed in the mind. And then the final of these mistaken views is this view that takes discipline, you could say monastic vows, or yogic conduct to be supreme. What we have to understand is that there are many methods. It is taught that there are 84,000 different types of methods or teachings. But ultimately, what we need to do is to develop this insight or wisdom. And it is by resting in this wisdom that we achieve the final goal of liberation from samsara, but also final and omniscient Buddhahood. So I hope that this has been of some use to you, and that will aid you in your studies on the spiritual path, and also to gain greater understanding of the profound meaning of the Buddha Dharma. And until next time, then see you later.